Hi everyone, thank you for coming in and welcome to yet another Trizatech sponsored webinar. Here is Jonathan from Trizatech, and once again I will be your host for today's session, how a Swiss government uses case management and CMMN to keep track of parliamentary interventions. So I will start by introducing our panelists. They are the leaders of the project of this case study. They will be with us in just a few moments. But before that, I will provide some context about the Trizatech technology to use, and this will lead us to introduce our main session. The presentation should last about 35 minutes, so this will give us some time at the end to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to use the questions widget in your GoToWebinar control panel that you can easily locate on your screen. One last thing, this webinar is being recorded and we will send you the replay link by email later today. So we are very lucky to have the three leaders of the project with us today. First, we have Serge Schiltz. He is the founder of Process Centric, a firm that provides expertise in the field of business process and rules management, based in Switzerland, and he is working all over Europe. He has delivered business process analysis, decision management, and software development projects for over 25 years. Dr. Schiltz is an author, university lecturer, and instructor in project management, business analysis, and BPM. He has published several articles and books in English, German, and French. Next, we have Jean-François Gonguet. He is Senior Solution Architect at Adesso Suisse AG. Jean-François is in charge of developing partnerships for business project management, containerization, and cloud-ready application with various technology providers. Before that, he spent many years at IBM as technical pre-sales architect and has been involved in different projects around BPM and integration for large customers for these years. And third, we have Jean-Christophe Crétenant. He is the head of information system at Canton Valais Government Controlling. For 15 years, Jean-Christophe devoted himself as a power builder and PL SQL specialist in the development of an IT solution allowing the management of the state by performance mandate. In 2012, during his master's degree in information systems management, he discovered BPMN and project management. Since then, he is coordinating interagency projects, including via PARL, the project we are talking about today, keeping tracks of parliamentary interventions. So for those of you who are not familiar with Trizatech, we are a visual modeling and business automation software provider. With the Digital Enterprise Suite, our clients are in a unique position to transform their business not only to become more efficient and effective, but also more agile and innovating and improving customer experience. At the bottom of the slide, you can see all the tiles representing the suite's component as they all bring value on their own, but our clients make the most out of them by combining their use. So we support a lot of different digital transformation types of projects. Here's just a list of some of the many use cases our clients are using our toolset for. And today, our case study will cover many of these challenges. So you will learn how the Swiss government is able to overcome them by leveraging an innovative approach. So here's just a visual representation of the Trizatech toolset. It is used by business and IT users alike, from the strategy to the operations. It provides insights and guidance for a successful transformation. Once the operational models are created, they can be published and executed. And being standard-based, the models can be executed in an engine that supports BPMN, DMN, and or CMMN. So in our particular case, our team used the CMMN modeler to create case management models and use them to keep track of parliamentary interventions. The CMMN models are then implemented on the state administration execution engine. So many wondered, why did they use case management and CMMN for this type of project? Well, this is exactly what you will learn. So let's start the session. I will be back in about 35 to 40 minutes for the Q&A. So please ask questions using the GoToWebinar questions widget. Let's jump to the presentation. Here's Dr. Schiltz, everyone.
Hello, this is Serge Schiltz. I will immediately hand over to Jean-Christophe, who will start to present to us the project.
Hi everyone, I'm Jean-Christophe. I will present you the canton of Valais, then the parliament, and finally I will present you the follow-up of parliamentary intervention. So Switzerland is a most mountainous country in Central Europe. The key industry of Switzerland are banking and finance, and Swiss watches and chocolate are world famous as Roger Federer. So in Switzerland, we have a semi-direct democracy. It's composed of 26 cantons. The canton of Valais is one of these cantons. It is located in the southwest of the country. It shares some of its border with France and Italy. The west part of Valais is French-speaking, and the east part of Valais is German-speaking. Its most famous peak is Mount Cervin, Matterhorn in local language. The separation of powers in the canton of Valais. So we have three powers: the government, the parliament, and the cantonal court. There are about 350,000 people living in Valais. The state council is composed of 5 people, each one conducting a department of the administration. About 4,000 people are working for the administration. The parliament is called the Grand Council and is composed of 130 people. The State Council and the Parliament are directly elected by the population. Every 4 years, a new election takes place. Now the Parliament, the Grand Council, meets on average 6 times a year. Each session lasts 4 days. Members of the Parliament are grouped in the Parliament according to their political color. Each member of Parliament has a seat reserved throughout his term. He has an audio headset in order to obtain the translation of the speeches into the other cantonal languages due to the bilingualism of the canton. The state councillors face parliamentarians. Behind them are the member of the Speaker of Parliament and the management of the Parliament's service. Members of Parliament have different instruments at their disposal. As intervention, we can mention the parliamentary initiative, which allows for the proposal of a new law, the motion, which allows a law or even the constitution to be amended, the postulate, which asks the Council of State to study a specific question and prepare a report or proposals, the inquiry, this is a simple request for an explanation addressed to the Council of the State, the written question, finally, which is a question to the Council of State for which the deputy will receive a personal answer. So now the follow-up of Parliament intervention. Here is about this, the head of Parliamentary Services, jointly with the Chancellor, have initiated a project to implement a system for keeping track of parliamentary intervention from their deposit, the very beginning by a member of Parliament, to the classification by Parliament after execution. This is, on your screen, a basic view, or we could say a high-level representation of the life cycle of an intervention. The intervention navigates between the Parliament and the administration through the conduct of the Parliamentary Service and the Chancellery, passing through the various departments and services of the administration of the Canton of Valais. But the basic question to be answered seems very simple. What is the status of my intervention?
Thank you, Jean-Christophe. This is Serge. I'm taking back, and we're looking at the analysis part in this project. So we started off with this diagram, with this simple BPMN diagram that Jean-Christophe presented to you just a few seconds ago. And it looks quite, at a high level, it looks like a classical structured and sequential process, which is the typical use case for a BPMN diagram. But if you dig a little bit deeper, and for example, you take the first step, the first task or sub-process, if we may say so, in this process, the deposit, the key things that are being done there, the new intervention is fed into the process by a different system. So we have an interface to the virtual office, as it is called. It is a system used by the members of parliament to capture their parliamentary interventions. Then the admissibility is reviewed by the Parliamentary Services to decide if it's really admissible to treat this parliamentary intervention. In parallel, the interventions are translated either from French to German or from German to French. So far, everything looks quite classical and quite well fit for a BPMN process. But several people may intervene in the meantime. For example, some parliamentary interventions can be submitted as being urgent. Now, when you look into them in more detail, some are not as urgent as they may look, so they may be downgraded to become regular or ordinary interventions. Then an author can change his mind and revoke an intervention. When somebody submits an intervention, there are stakeholders who also sign. There are co-authors, co-signees, there are political parties supporting the intervention. They can withdraw their support. Or typos can be corrected. Sometimes things are misspelled, and then the Parliamentary Services can correct the text of the interventions, and then they have to be retranslated. And even more. Now comes the testing of the admissibility. The admissibility rulings can be challenged by the author. And then, if they are challenged, the Parliament's office decides on those challenges. The admission can be subject to modifications. The modifications can be accepted or rejected, or the authors may simply remain silent and not react to a proposed modification or to a proposed refusal. If you try to represent these particular situations, these little special situations in BPMN, that become tricky. In particular, because all of this has to be represented with a lot of event-based exclusive gateways and with event sub-processes. And I will show you an example of what this looks like in just a minute. Don't try ever to explain this to the process owner. Don't try to show these diagrams because they become overly complex. This is what just the first sub-process, the deposit, would look like. So in the upper part, this upper part, and then you have multiple event sub-processes for all the things that can happen in between, because somebody thinks now it's my turn to intervene and change the course of the intervention. This is exactly what CMMN has been designed for. The object of the process, the thing, in this particular case, the parliamentary intervention, in CMMN is called a case file. And everything is centered around this case file and not around the sequence flow as it is in BPMN. So in a parliamentary intervention, progresses from stage to stage or from state to state. And then the activities transforming the object are all performed on the case file. So it's unlike in a BPMN diagram where you focus on the activities. Here you focus on the case file, on the object, and different actions are applied to this object. The sequence of activities is not the key point of the modeling as opposed to BPMN. And finally, sentries and connectors define dependencies and conditions, because all these activities that can be applied to the object, to the parliamentary interventions, have some dependencies between them. They cannot happen in any sequence, but the sequence is not 100% predefined. Now, the same model for the same stage, for the overall model looks like this. You find again the 6 key elements, the 6 states. They are called stages in CMMN: the deposit, the breakdown, the development, the response, processing, and execution. Just like in the simple BPMN diagram, high-level diagram that we've seen previously, in this diagram, I've just added the archiving of the intervention, which was in fact missing on the other diagram. If I dive into the deposit stage here, it looks like this. Well, it may look complex in a way because there are many objects on it, but the main thing is this here, receive intervention, is the starting point because there are no connectors, there are no sentries leading to it. And then here you have all the options, what could be done, but it doesn't have to be done. What could be done next? And you progress through the process using all these connectors, using the dependencies, but all the other things can happen in parallel. So like here we have the translation can be done, a revocation can be performed, a withdrawal can be performed all along. And only when the initiative has been accepted, we can progress, we can move on to the next stage. What we discovered a little bit in this project, because it's one of our first CMMN projects, is that as every activity stands a little bit on its own, and it is not firmly tied into this larger sequence as it would be in a BPMN diagram, this approach is very well suited for an agile approach. Because we see every CMMN activity as a user story, which I then can describe to my colleague Jean-François, who is implementing the whole thing on the process engine. And this is the point where I can hand over to him.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So I will speak a little bit more in technical details about implementation. So let me first introduce the ADESO company members, and we will deep dive a little bit into the solution architecture, because I think it's important to show what different components we put in place to run these CMMN processes. And I would like on this part focus a little bit on the human task. As Serge mentioned, the modelization, the CMMN modelization will focus on the case, on the business object. In our case, the interventions. But we have, of course, to be able to retrieve what activities can be done at a time for in the life cycle of this intervention. So we will see a little bit in more details what Camunda provides in order to retrieve this information from the system. And if we have time and if it runs, because you know it's always the surprise, we can try to show you a little bit the real demo, the real demonstration. A few words about my company, ADESO Swiss, so is the partner for digital transformation in Switzerland. ADESO Switzerland is part of the ADESO group. We have more people in Germany and Austria, but we have a lot of people also in Switzerland, and we have 15 people in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, and we can help État du Valais for their project. A few words about the partnership. We are a premium partner for Red Hat solution and software. We are leading project around OpenShift and also Kafka and ActiveMQ and so on. And we are also partner with Camunda and IBM. In the Swiss Romande, we are acting for banking sector, life science sectors, and public sector also. A few words about the VIAPAL solution architecture. So as mentioned in this diagram, we put in place a number of different components. So first of all, we rely on the Camunda, this one, sorry. We are relying on the Camunda engine. So this is embedded in the application, in the Spring Boot application. But in front of it, we will have this front-end application in order to implement the business rules and the logic of the application. And because we don't want to use the standard interface provided by Camunda in the cockpit, we developed our own front-end application based on Angular. So we have different components, we have different things to integrate, and just to mention the different subsystem we have to deal with, there is numbers of other components that État du Valais is using. We have, of course, a mail server because we have to send email to the different actors of the process. We have the open text for the content management system. And regarding security, because it's important in that case to be able to check that people have the right to see and to update different information. So we rely on the key clock Red Hat SSO solution, and that we have to integrate that part, of course. So what I would like to show you now is a little bit of what Serge mentioned regarding the first stage of the process, that is the deposit stage. I'm sorry, the diagram is in French. I didn't take the time to translate it, but it's not really a problem. I just would like to highlight the different elements that CMMN notation brings on the table and that Camunda implements. So first of all, in terms of activities you can run inside this process, you have, of course, human tasks and you have process tasks. So basically, a process task is a call to a BPMN subprocess, and you can, of course, leverage the powerful of BPMN at this stage. But it's called by a CMMN per process. We have the milestone that you can modelize here and to make some synchronization point. And one thing is very important for this new approach with non-linear processes is the sentry guard. So it allows you to define conditions on which an activity will be started and also the exit of some activities. Later on, two things we have to mention is that, as you can see on this part of the model, there are some activities that are completely alone and not linked together. And it's important to be able to define a rule for activating these activities, meaning that perhaps all these things cannot be done all the time. So you have to define conditions. So it's done with this triangle in the notation, the manual activation rules. And another point is with this other symbol, with the repetition rule. So you can describe and define that this activity will be repeated numbers of times. And the Camunda engine implement that quite well, and it works quite well. So this is a brief overview of the main elements that comes in that CMMN modelization and implementation in Camunda. And now I just would like to illustrate what Serge mentioned before regarding how to modelize, and that the central point is the business object and not the workflow itself. And for that, I will take a classical, an example of navigation in the application. Okay, I will not mention that. So we have this process, we have this first stage deploy on the Camunda engine, and let's try to see a use case, two use cases. So the first one, the first thing we want to do in the application, of course, is to be able to list the active intervention. So as you see, I use the term intervention. This is the main business object managed in the processes. So how can I retrieve all the running case instances in the system? So basically, we will have an interface on the front end for that, and we will have a service in the back end that will exchange with the Camunda engine to retrieve this list of instances. So we will use the Java API provided by Camunda for that. And basically, we will call this service, of course. And what we will do is, I cannot show you the details, of course, but I can answer a different question after the webinar. But we will use a quite powerful interface on Camunda, and we will ask the case services engine to query for the case instances, so the different instances of this case, for a case definition case. In our case, this is suivi intervention. And we will filter that with a state of active, because all the down and terminated instances are keeping in the system, of course. So we can also ask for terminated and finished activities, but we want only the active ones. And the answer for that will be a list of business objects. So the main thing is to retrieve the business attributes, the intervention date, the author, the title, the text, and so on. And we will add in that object the case instance ID that will identify completely for which instance we are talking of. Okay? And of course, at the end, in the Angular client, we will treat that as JSON file and display that in form of the list of active instances. And of course, the next use case, the next need is to be able to click and to go on the detail for one intervention. And for that, of course, we will interact with the backend and send the case instance ID as a parameter, because it will be the key that will allow us to retrieve the things regarding this instance. And we will have another services, the second one, that will, the goal of this service is to identify, according to the state of the instance, what are the different activities available for the client, available for the user interface. So what can I use for interact with this intervention? In our case, it's in French, so I translate it for you. We can update the intervention, we can translate the intervention because it's written in 2 languages, and we can do the this receivability admissibility. Okay, so we want that Camunda send these 3 activity, these 3 case execution instance. So for that, Camunda provide another interface. There is a lot of things, but you can do this. So we will use the interface that will ask the case services engine to create a query for execution instances, this time, not case instances. We provide, of course, the case instance ID. This is the key of the element. And we can parameter or numbers of filters on that query. For our case, we will select only the activity of type human task. We will select the state active or enabled. And I will come back on this a little bit later. And of course, we will also filter on what is allowed by the user who is doing the request. Okay? And same things as before, we will return a list of business object called task with the name of the task, with the duration, with everything, and of course with an execution ID that will allow us to terminate, to close, and so on for the activities before. So a little precision on this state. So there are human tasks that are active. It means that they are already started, affected to one user, and some of them are enabled. So it means that you have first to start it and to assign it to a user before to run it. So it's a little bit different, and it's a link to the fact that we are talking about manual human tasks, manual activities. So if we have these services, and we have it, it works, the front end will call that, and we will be able to go in the detail of this intervention by showing to the end user what kind of actions you can do on this particular instance. In our case, we will see this update, admissibility, and translation activity. I can show you that in real with a few minutes. So let's go. Normally, it should work. So I'm sorry, the user interface is in French, but that's okay. Let's see. We can ask so this is really for just showing you what kind of interface we have built, but this is really exactly what I explained before. The first use case is retrieve the list of interventions. So we are asking the backend, we are using the Camunda interface to retrieve the different instances, and we are showing the different business objects with their entities. And behind each of them, there is this case instance ID that completely identifies the instance or the intervention itself in the system. And if I look in detail in one particular instance, second services call, we are now using the execution query, and we retrieve the different action we have on that. I will stop there, but if I run one of these human tasks, we will interact with the business object, change some of the attributes, send it back to Camunda. Camunda will take the update into account and terminate the activity, and the flows of the different new activities available is managed by Camunda itself, of course. That's all for me, and let's go back to the presentation and to the question and answer session.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, guys. I think it gave a great overview of how using CMMN can help solve a lot of problems when you have complexities in terms of different stages, when you have interaction with different users. And we do have some questions, actually. So let's go with the first question from David. David says that he has the impression that CMMN is a niche topic. What's your opinion on will this standard make it out of the niche, and should it be used by a growing number of users? If you guys have any opinion on that.
Oh, this is Serge. Right now, CMMN still is a niche topic. It is the youngest of the three business process related standards of OMG. And I have to admit, I have not seen many colleagues use CMMN in practice. I do, however, think that there is a lot of value in there, because what we see, it's not a replacement for BPMN, but it's rather, I would call it a layer in between, or it closes a gap between a process architecture and what BPMN can does in defining the workflows. Because in a way, it's maybe misusing the term a little bit, but it's sort of, it orchestrates different processes. It shows and in which context, in which situation can a particular BPMN process, and you have seen there are process activities, they represent BPMN processes, in which context can a certain process be executed. And what we, if the demo had gone a little bit longer, we would have seen it, that based on the CMMN diagram, the process engine can decide which options, which processes, which activities are presented to which user, which group of users, in which situation in the evolution of the case file in this unstructured process. So it really helps the user navigate through the process, because it only presents those options and not a huge menu of whatever would be possible, but really it presents what is possible in this particular situation for this particular user. I hope that answers the question. Do you have anything to add to this, Jean-François?
No, I agree with Serge. We haven't seen a lot of CMMN implementation, to be honest. I made different projects with BPMN, of course, but in that particular case, in that particular project, I have to say that CMMN is really useful and powerful, and allows us to cover the needs and the business needs. It's really efficient in our case. But we are perhaps a little bit in simple things. But one thing I would like to mention is that behind a process activity inside the CMMN, you can use the power of BPMN and have a lot of interaction and things in the activity itself.
So maybe to add to this, the split that we currently have is that interest with CMMN does not seem huge at this point in time, if we look at the market. However, the last time I've been to a technical meeting of OMG, I was able to find quite a number of people who think that there is value and that we should make an investment into CMMN because there is a gap between the process architecture and BPMN that should be closed and where CMMN can really contribute a lot of value. And therefore, I believe, yes, it will sometime in the future, in the coming months, I think, and I'm convinced it will come out of this niche.
Great, thank you. So very interesting answers here. So yeah, I think as you guys mentioned, I think that the value of CMMN and these other standards, you mentioned BPMN and there's also DMN, is the fact that they can be used together in combination. So you can use them for whichever types of process or cases or decisions. That makes sense. So absolutely, I'm right in the same page as you. So Dilip had a question about the maturity of the CMMN framework. I think we touched this question a little bit. I don't know if there's anything you guys want to add about the maturity of the framework itself or the specification.
Well, I think there are two facets we could talk about. One is the CMMN standard, which is in its version 1.1. When you work with it in detail, like we do in this project, you'll come to realize that maybe a few things are missing. I mean, there are some details missing in the current standard regarding the definition of case activities or the behavior of case files when they are passed along between the different activities, in particular the case activities. I have some open questions regarding the exit sentries, but this will have to be addressed by OMG in the coming months, and I would hope that there would be a further version of the standard to clarify some of these issues. Now, Jean-François, your implementation expert.
Yeah, so on the implementation point of view, I will speak only regarding Camunda, of course, because this is what we're using in this project. There are some limitations on the CMMN implementation in Camunda engine, to be honest. I was fighting with some things to implement in our project and try to find some workaround, but honestly, for the main part, it's okay. And Camunda also implements some specific features to deal with this limitation. But I have to say that regarding the Java interface provided by Camunda, we can do a lot of things. And there is a quite good integration with this Spring Boot framework. The engine itself is seen as a bean regarding the development of the front end. And on the other side, when you have some exit point in the process, you are calling, Camunda is calling some classes called delegates in the Java part, and you retrieve everything from Spring. You can use different services. I mentioned in the presentation before that we need to interact with open text for the content management system, to interact with the mail server, of course, and all these services provided as being in Spring Boot is completely callable from Camunda without any problem. So really, it's very good sign, and I think it's a good point to use Camunda for that. Even if, of course, it can be good if they are completely aligned with the standard. But yeah. That's
okay.
I think what you can hear from this is that we're not yet at model-based development, where I could model a case and Jean-François could just take it like this and run it on the execution engine. He has to transform my models, my analysis models, do some workarounds to make it work on the process engine that we're using. But it's still quite an interesting approach, even if we have intermediate steps.
I confirm.
So, okay, and interesting. So you guys are using CMMN as the modeling and documentation kind of tool, and then to communicate the logic behind the processes to the development side. Interesting.
Yep.
Okay, I have another question here that might be a little bit more directed towards Jean-Christophe. So there's someone that's wondering what is an intervention? So is it an oral speech by a citizen? Is it an oral speech by someone else? A proposed written document? Just if you can give a little bit more details to Miguel here, who's asking this question.
It's a proposal written, very short document. That means the deputy, they are the only one who can do it. So the deputy is just written a very short text describing what he wants from the government most of the time. So he gave simply a short title and a short textual description, and that's all. Okay. As a corpus for an intervention.
Okay, perfect. So I have another question here from Tony. So the question is, and maybe you all three can maybe share the answer on this, was what were the initial metrics or the initial KPIs you guys used to get the project started, and how can you see it as a success or not? So what are the key performance indicators?
So basically, today, we cannot answer to the question I mentioned in my presentation. What's the state, or where is my intervention? So today, if we want to answer to a deputy, where is his intervention, we have to look which department is in charge. We have to phone to the department. The department has to look which service is in charge, has to phone to the service. So it takes too much time to give an answer for one single intervention. So the KPI, the success will be if we can in one shot say, here is the state of all the interventions that have been deposited this year. If in one click we could have the answer, this is the first goal. We are already happy with this project, and then center on this, on the answer of this question, we have discovered a lot of improvement by describing the process. A lot of improvement we can add to the daily work of our administration's co-worker.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
If I can just add some points, two points I would like to add regarding that. The first one is that currently these interventions are managed manually for large part, and needs to have a lot of paper printed. So, you know, it's good for the planet if you can limit that, first of all. And the second thing is that there are in the public sector, there are some regulations, and sometimes for some have an engine like Camunda, it will be very difficult to implement. So having the guarantee that we will answer the questions and send the different documents and so on in the current in the good time frame, this is very important, of course, for this process.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we'll take two last questions here. One from Pavel asking, so you know the agile approach of development. So his question is about how CMMN and agile can support each other. So I don't know if you have any comments on this.
Well, this is Serge. This is what I intended to show or to mention on my last slide, which is I found that unlike in BPMN, all the activities stand a little bit on their own, and therefore they can be viewed as somewhat isolated, and therefore to me they are the bridge to a user story, which I specify in Jira for Jean-François. So therefore, I think CMM is a perfect match, is perfectly fit for choosing an agile approach to development.
Okay, thank you. And the last question is probably directed to you as well, Serge. So one of the powerful, it's from Cohen. So one of the powerful concepts of CMMN is the discretionary concept for stages and tasks. So Cohen noticed that this wasn't used in the models that you showed. Is there any reasons why this wasn't used?
Well, there was an earlier version when I had it, because there are different types of interventions, and actually some stages are skipped for certain types of interventions. We could have used it, but there was no immediate need to do this, because I was able to work around it using the century concept. Because if it's emotional or yeah, a postulate. If it's a postulate or emotion, then it gets to the development stage, and in all the other cases, it skips the development stage. Well, this is something that you can easily handle using centuries. So there was no, in this particular case, there was no immediate need for using the discretionary concept. There are other projects. I'm working on another project where this makes more sense, but for this particular project, it didn't make too much sense to us. It might have been an option, but we didn't want to use that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So I think we'll just wrap it up. We have a lot of questions that unfortunately we don't really have time to answer. I don't want to bombard you guys with dozens of questions. So what I'll do to everyone that asked questions and that we didn't have time to get to, Hassan, Letitia, Thor, Hooter, I've seen your questions. There are very good questions. But unfortunately, since we were not necessarily prepared to have all these questions in, what we'll do is we'll just follow up after by email just to make sure that we were able to answer your questions. So thank you very much to the three of you. It was really interesting. I hope everybody in the room is agreeing with me. So once again, this webinar was recorded and we will send the replay link to everyone. So thank you very much, guys, and have a nice rest of the day.